Welcome to Eating Smart, Being Active. Today's lesson is Go Lean with Protein. Today I will be talking to you about the two different sources of protein, whether it's animal-based protein or plant-based protein. Then I will show some examples and talk about the differences between the two groups. Second part of our lesson today, we'll be talking about food safety. I have some meat models here, some thermometers, and in our flip chart, we will be talking about our different steps for food safety. Now, to begin in our handout, we have here what foods are in the protein group. Now, this group on my plate used to be called meat and beans group. Now we have it called the protein group, which is our actual nutrient that is in this group, protein, along with others, but this is our main nutrient. If you'll notice, the size of this food group is a little bit smaller because we don't need as much of it as the others. And you'll see why in a little bit. Now, talking about our handout here, we do have our plant-based proteins, which include any kind of beans, such as pinto, black, kidney, navy beans, our black-eyed peas or our split peas. We do have soybeans, which are also known as edamame. We have our lentils, our tofu, nuts, seeds, and peanut butter. And these are all plant-based, which means that they are not from animal. Then we have our animal-based protein foods, which do include beef, lamb, pork, chicken, turkey, fish and shellfish, and eggs. Here on the table, I do have other examples, and these include some more nuts and seeds. A lot of times we tend to forget that this is something that we can include as part of our protein or a snack for the day. We do have our eggs. We have our peanut butter. Some of the fish that is included is tuna, canned tuna, fresh tuna, salmon, any kind of fish or shellfish. Right here we have an example of rotisserie chicken or chicken breast. We have a pork chop, as well as some black beans. Now, there is some differences between these two groups. Of course, they both contain protein, but I want to let you know that our plant-based protein foods tend to be lower in fat. A lot of times they have 0% or grams of fat to begin with, until during cooking time that fat may be added in the form of oil or a dressing or some other type of fat. We also get iron from these plant-based protein foods. Iron, remember, is a mineral that helps keep your blood healthy and helps prevent anemia. We also get fiber from the plant-based protein foods. And fiber is something that we will not find in the animal-based protein foods. So in the animal-based protein foods, we have our protein, of course. We can also find iron in some meats more than the others. We will not have fiber. Anytime it's anything that comes from animal, we won't have fiber. And we want to make sure that we are finding our animal-based protein foods that are lower in fat, because these do contain saturated fat. This is the fat that can be bad for our heart or raise cholesterol levels. So we want to keep the saturated fat levels as low as possible. Some easy ways to do this is to cook your meat. And ground beef, for example, you can drain out the fat. You can even rinse it when you are done cooking to reduce some of that fat or a lot of the fat. You can take the skin and all of the white parts off of your meat, the skin off of the chicken. These really help in reducing the fat content and consumption in your meals. Now, our fish are the only ones that won't contain saturated fat. They have a different type of fat that is recommended for us to be consuming at least twice a week. And these are called omegas. These omegas are healthy fats, and these are the types of fats that we need to be consuming at least twice a week. And they can be found in fish. Now, I want to open up our handout here to start talking about portion sizes. Our portion sizes with the proteins, protein food groups are going to be measured in ounce equivalents as well. So here we have our examples of a small hamburger patty, a small chicken breast, 1 5-ounce can of tuna that is drained, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, we have tofu, black beans, 2 ounces of almonds or another type of nut, and we have an egg. So for our small hamburger patty, it's going to be the equivalent of 3 ounces, as well as the chicken breast will count as 3 ounces. Our 5-ounce can of drained tuna will count as 3 ounces. Our 2 tablespoons of peanut butter will count as 2 ounces. Our half cup of tofu will count as 2 ounces. Our half cup of cooked beans will count as 2 ounces. We have 24 almonds, and those will count as 2 ounces. And we have 1 egg that will always count as 1 ounce, no matter how it is cooked. 1 egg will always be 1 ounce. Now, how much is needed based on your age and diet? We have here ages 2 to 8 need 2 to 4 ounces a day, the equivalent to 2 to 4 ounces a day. For ages 9 and up, we need 5 to 6.5 ounces a day. So kind of the same as with the grains group, we need to make sure that we average in between the 5 to 6.5 ounces. So it would be about 5.5 to 6 ounces, the regular that would be needed for a 2,000 calorie diet. Of course, those who are more active, like I mentioned in previous lessons, can consume 6.5 ounces of protein a day. Because their body is burning off more of those calories, they will be consuming more of those calories. I want to give an example of what can be considered your consumption of protein for the day. Let's say that during the morning I have for breakfast 1 egg. This is going to be my 1 ounce. Then let's say that during lunchtime I have a small chicken breast on top of my salad. This is 3 ounces, that gives me 4 ounces for the day. That means that for my afternoon, I have about 2 ounces left for consumption. That could give me, for example, I could probably consume a half cup of cooked beans, and that would give me the rest of my 2 ounces that are needed. So I want you, when planning your protein for the day, to also remember that we need to have our full plate. Not just thinking about only our protein, but also what vegetables will we be serving with that protein? Which fruits will we be serving? Will it be in between meals, or will it be as dessert? Will we have a grain on that plate? What grain goes good with that protein? As well as our dairy product. Will it be a glass of milk? Will it be some cheese on top of our food? Always, always think of a complete meal when planning each food group. The next thing I want to go into detail on is how our foods vary in fat and fiber and protein. I have some examples here of roasted chicken, 3 ounces of roasted chicken, which is about the size of this piece of chicken that's here, or a chicken breast. And for protein, we have 26 grams. For total fat, we have 3 grams. And for fiber, we have 0. This is because, again, it's animal, and animal does not have fiber in it. Then we have our ½ cup of cooked black beans. And this contains 8 grams of protein, 0 grams of total fat. So naturally, these black beans have no fat. And then we have 8 grams of fiber, which is a very good source of fiber. Then we have our ½ cup of tofu. Tofu has 10 grams of protein, 6 grams of total fat, naturally, and 1 gram of fiber, so it is low in fiber. We have our canned tuna in water, and this is the 3 ounces, which is equivalent to a 5-ounce can, gives us 23 grams of protein, 2 grams of total fat, very low in fat, and 0 grams of fiber because it is animal. Then we have something a little bit less healthy of an example, which is a hot dog. So for that hot dog, we have 7 grams of protein, 16 grams of total fat, and 0 grams of fiber because it is animal. If you notice, the protein and the total fat flipped there. One's higher than the other. We'll get back to that in a second. Last example is a pork chop. So 3-ounce pork chop has 25 grams of protein, 13 grams of total fat, and 0 grams of fiber because it is animal. Now, all of these here have more protein than total fat, except for the hot dog. This is something that we want to avoid. We want to avoid that our protein may have more fat than protein. And this is how we will have an easier way of figuring out if this is a better choice for us from this food group. Now, of course, when working with meats and raw foods and raw meats and that kind of thing, we want to also talk about our food safety. So we want to talk about, in our loose sheet here, our 4 steps of food safety. And I have some examples of things I'm going to show you here. Steps for food safety are clean, cook, separate, and chill. Now, for keeping food safe, the first thing that we need to do is clean. Clean our area, our utensils, any pots and pans or cooking utensils that we may be using, especially if they haven't been used in a while. It tells us wash our hands, utensils, and surfaces in warm, soapy water every time we begin to work in the kitchen or before we start planning or cooking a meal. This is what we want to do. Step number 2 is separate. This begins in our shopping cart in the grocery store. We want to separate our raw meat from other foods. The reason for this is because we wouldn't want a package of raw meat to drip onto any other foods in our shopping cart or in our refrigerator or in our shopping bags and that kind of thing. We want to make sure that we keep them separate. Store raw meat covered on the lowest shelf in your refrigerator. This is a very good example of something that is safe to do if you are going to be defrosting meats in the refrigerator, if you are going to store them after a shopping trip. This is something we want to make sure that they are well covered, wrapped in a plastic bag or in a plate of some sort that has a little bit of a lip on the side that won't let your juices drip down into any drawers or anywhere else in your refrigerator. And use separate plates for cooked and raw meat. We never want to return cooked meat onto a tray or plate where raw meat has already previously been. This can cause cross-contamination and foodborne illness, so we want to make sure that we are keeping these separate. Cook. Our third step is cook. Use a food thermometer to test meat for doneness. Now, I have an example here that I want to show. I want to use this sponge as an example of a piece of meat. Let's say that I have a pan where I'm cooking a hamburger patty. I want to check to make sure that that hamburger patty is cooked to the temperature where it needs to be before we can consume it. So using tongs or a spatula, I want to lift that up out of the pan, and using a food thermometer, which looks like this, insert into the side of the patty or steak or whatever type of meat it may be, and wait for about 10 to 15 seconds for that thermometer to show us the temperature that is needed for that type of meat. If I have a hamburger patty in a pan, I would never be able to just insert the food thermometer from the top down while it's in the pan. It needs to be inserted into the thickest part of the meat. Most thermometers have an indentation or kind of a dent. This is the area that tells the temperature or takes the temperature for the meat. So we want to make sure that that little spot is in the thickest part of your meat. We also want to make sure that we follow our meat temperature guide or our food temperature guide. So for a ground beef hamburger patty, we would want it at least at 160 degrees Fahrenheit before we would be able to consume it. Back to our loose sheet here. Our last food safety step is chill. Keep our refrigerator between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. We have a refrigerator thermometer here as an example, and this refrigerator thermometer can be kept inside your refrigerator towards the center of the refrigerator towards the back. We never want to keep it on the door. It can be placed in one of the drawers for easy storage, but if you keep it on the door, it may not keep the temperature, read the temperature the way that you need to be seeing it. So we need to keep it towards the center of the refrigerator. And this should be reading between 32 degrees and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If our foods are kept above 40 degrees in our refrigerator, they may go bad quicker than they're supposed to. They won't last us as long. Our leftovers, our milk, our eggs won't last us as long as they're supposed to be lasting us in the refrigerator. Refrigerate or freeze foods within 2 hours. This is very important to prevent bacteria accumulation. Every 30 minutes, our bacteria on our food multiplies at room temperature. So I have a very good example here of some meat models. Let's say that I have a package of ground beef and it is 12 o'clock. I have gone to the grocery store and I have picked out my ground beef before anything else in the grocery store. Naturally, ground beef has a little bit of bacteria on it. This bacteria will die in the cooking process. After about an hour in the grocery store and going to the other side of the grocery store and choosing everything that I need for my shopping trip, I'm finally ready to pay at the register. My ground beef has been sitting in my shopping cart for about an hour. It is at room temperature and it's starting to accumulate bacteria. So from 5, I have at this point about 80 bacteria. By the time that I get home, another hour has passed. My food or ground beef under a microscope will look about like this, with 1,280 bacteria. And this is at food. This happens when you leave food at room temperature that has already been cooked, food that needs to be refrigerated. This can happen with milk, any dairy products, any leftovers that might be on the stove. We want to make sure that we avoid leaving them at room temperature. And on hot days and shopping trips, we can take an ice chest with us or a cooler that may have ice or ice packs, something to help keep our food cooler and not at room temperature or higher, especially during the summer. Now back to our sheet here. Thaw foods overnight in the refrigerator or microwave just before cooking, not on the counter. We want to make sure that when we are thawing or defrosting our foods, that we are moving them from the freezer to the refrigerator to thaw or defrost in there. We can also use a microwave using the defrost button so that your foods will defrost from the center out and not cooked around the edges. These two are the safest way to defrost or thaw your foods. And as we spoke about in previous lessons, meal planning does help us prepare for thawing out our foods as well, because we may already know what needs to be cooked the following day, and we can move our food, whatever it may be, that is needed from the freezer to the refrigerator. Now, on the back side of our loose page here, it's going to give us a little bit more detail on how to reduce fat when cooking, as well as storing our protein foods. So it tells us here that we can use plant protein foods more often because they are lower in fat. And this again includes our beans, our nuts and seeds, and tofu. We can trim the visible fat from the meat that we are cooking before cooking. Remove our skin from the chicken or turkey after cooking. We can roast, grill, or broil instead of frying. So even if you wanted to still bread something, you would be able to bake it in the oven instead of frying it. And we can eat smaller portions. Smaller portions also is what's recommended from our protein food group. Now, as far as storing our protein foods, we can store in the refrigerator or the freezer at different time periods. For our fresh meat, roast, chops, or steak, we can store those in the refrigerator for 3 to 5 days. After this, if they aren't going to be used for any meals at that time, we recommend putting them in the freezer and they can stay there for up to 6 months, 4 to 6 months. For fresh hamburger and other ground meats or stew meat that may already be chopped up and prepared, they can be in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 days. In the freezer, they last 3 to 4 months. Any kind of leftovers or cooked foods can last 3 to 4 days in the refrigerator, but they can also be frozen for 2 to 3 months. And then we have our fresh poultry, such as chicken or turkey. This can be in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 days or in the freezer for up to 9 months. This has a longer freezing period. We have eggs that are fresh in the shell, and those can be in the refrigerator for 4 to 5 weeks, although they cannot be frozen. Bacon and smoked sausage can last in the refrigerator for about 7 days or frozen for about 1 month. Raw sausage can be in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 days, or frozen for 1 to 2 months. Hot dogs. Hot dogs can be in the refrigerator 2 weeks unopened or 1 week opened, 1 to 2 months frozen. Our lunch meat can last in the refrigerator 2 weeks unopened or 3 to 5 days after being opened. Frozen, they can last 1 to 2 months. And our last example is fish and shellfish. These can be in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 days or in the freezer for 3 to 6 months. So we want to remember when talking about protein that our groups are different. We want to remember that our plant-based protein foods do have less fat or are fat-free naturally. We do want to remember that our animal protein foods contain saturated fat, and we want to make sure that we trim the visible fat or the skin on our poultry and do what we can to make sure that these are lower in fat before consuming them. And we also want to make sure that we follow our food safety steps, which are clean, separate, cook, and chill. Now, we do have our goals for the week for this lesson. The first one says, I will choose lean sources of protein foods this week by doing what? Think of some way that you can make your protein foods leaner. The second one says, I will keep my food safe to eat this week by. Remember your food safety steps and remember how you can keep your food safe to eat. And the third one says, I will be more physically active this week by. Remember that this is something that you can do by adding a couple of minutes to your routine or adding a little bit of intensity to your physical activity. Thank you for watching our lesson. Our incentives for today's lesson, Go Lean with Protein, are our food thermometer, our refrigerator thermometer, and our magnet that lets us know what temperature the different types of meat need to be cooked at. Next is a healthy food recipe that goes with our lesson. I hope you enjoyed our food recipe. Now for some exercise. Here is our warm-up. Today I'm going to be showing you the steps for warm-up and how to do them. So with our first step, we want to go ahead and make sure that our feet are shoulder width apart. We want to stretch our arms out and reach for the sky. And we want to do this about 3 to 4 times. And it's just starting to get our blood moving. And we're going to either move our arms with us or you can keep them down at the side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you can put your hands on your hips and we're going to be stepping from side to side. 1, 2, 3, 4. And back at the center. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to be moving the same arm that you move with your leg. Okay, so we'll start on the right side. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we step to the side. And some of these steps are repeated, but again, this is to get you warmed up and get your blood flowing. Now it's time to get up and get moving. Let's do our exercise for this week's lesson. Our exercise for this lesson is the skater hop. We want to make sure that when we are leaning forward that we keep our back straight. I'm going to be doing a count of 4 to show as an example. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you do this at home, make sure that you do your 2 sets of 8. Next, we're doing a little bit of a cool down exercise. I want you to begin this exercise by breathing in, moving your arms up, and breathing out when you move your arms down. In, and out. One more time. And this helps calm your body down after an exercise so that you can make sure that if it's in the evening especially, it helps slow your body down and your heart rate isn't going as fast. Also, we want to make sure that we remember that as adults, we need 30 minutes of exercise 5 days or more out of the week. And for children and teenagers, they need an hour at least each day. Thank you for participating at this week's exercise. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and I will see you all at our next lesson.